The hotel lobby was alive with the soft hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the scent of fresh flowers. Angela moved quietly across the polished marble floor, her mop gliding in smooth strokes. She had worked at the Grand Royal Hotel for 5 years, never late, never complaining, always careful to stay invisible. For Angela, invisibility was a kind of armor. People noticed the cleanliness, not the cleaner, and that was fine with her. But that morning, invisibility failed her. Victor Hale walked in with a small group of wealthy friends, his expensive shoes clicking against the floor, his gold watch catching the sunlight. He was only 30, but already one of the richest property owners in the city, tall, sharp-featured, and always dressed in custom suits. Victor carried himself like the world belonged to him, and he treated most people like they were there only to serve him. Angela didn't look up when he passed, but she heard his laughter echo through the lobby. She kept mopping, moving to the side so they could pass. Then it happened. A waiter bumped into Victor's arm, spilling coffee across his sleeve. Victor stopped, glaring at the brown stain. Without thinking, he turned toward Angela, who was closest, and barked, "Hey, you, clean this. Shut up and work." The words were sharp, cutting through the quiet chatter of the lobby. Heads turned, conversations stopped. And in that moment, all eyes fell on Angela. Her hands froze on the mop handle. Her face felt hot, her chest tight. But she forced herself to breathe slowly. Angela sat in the small break room for a long time. The sound of laughter from the lobby drifted faintly through the closed door, a constant reminder of the man whose name was written on the letter. Her fingers brushed over the envelope again, the paper warm from being held. It felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of the power it carried. She read it again, word by word. The will belonged to a man named Edward Carver, a wealthy businessman who had stayed at the hotel months ago. Angela remembered him. He was polite, unlike most rich guests, and always greeted her with a smile once when his suitcase broke. She had helped him carry his things without being asked. He had told her, "Kindness is a rare coin, Angela, and it always comes back." She didn't know that those words would one day hold such meaning. Now, Edward Carver was gone, and in his will he had left a large estate, but with an unusual condition. The rightful heir could only receive it if Angela herself handed over the documents. Until then, she was the temporary custodian trusted to protect them, and that heir was Victor Hale, the same Victor who had just told her to shut up and work. Angela leaned back in her chair. She thought about how people like Victor treated people like her, invisible until they were needed. She thought about the way he had looked at her earlier, not even as a person, just as part of the furniture in the lobby. She thought about the recordings on those guests' phones, the whispers that had followed his outburst. The kitchen door opened, and her friend Rosa stepped in. Rosa was a fellow maid, older and wise, always watching out for Angela. "You okay?" Rosa asked, her voice gentle. Angela nodded, but Rosa's eyes narrowed. "You've got that look? The one you get when you're thinking about doing something dangerous." Angela smiled faintly. "It's not dangerous, just interesting." She didn't tell Rosa about the letter, not yet. It wasn't because she didn't trust her friend. It was because this was bigger than gossip. This was something that could change the balance of power between her and Victor completely. Later that afternoon, the hotel lawyer, Mr. Briggs, stopped by. He was a tall man with gray hair, wearing a suit that looked as tired as he did. He asked to speak with Angela in private. When they stepped into the quiet staff office, he closed the door behind them. "Miss Angela," he said, adjusting his glasses, "I wanted to confirm that you received Mr. Carver's letter." Angela nodded, holding it in her hands. Mr. Briggs continued, "You understand the responsibility. Until Mr. Hale meets with you personally, the estate remains in your control. No one else can release it." Angela's eyebrows lifted slightly. "In my control," she repeated. The lawyer nodded. Yes. And I should tell you, Mr. Hale will need it soon, very soon. His business situation isn't as strong as it looks. Angela tilted her head, curiosity sparking. What do you mean? Mr. Briggs lowered his voice. He's in debt, serious debt. This inheritance could be the only thing standing between him and losing everything. Angela felt the weight of those words. The man who had just mocked her might soon be desperate enough to come to her. And she wasn't sure how she felt about that. After the lawyer left, Angela returned to her duties. She moved through the hotel with her usual quiet efficiency, but her mind was anything but calm. Every time she passed the lobby, she caught glimpses of Victor leaning back in a chair, sipping expensive whiskey, acting like he owned the place, but she knew the truth now. Behind that confident smile was a man standing on the edge of a cliff. That evening, Angela walked home through the cool night air. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but her thoughts stayed on the letter in her bag. She wondered how long it would take before Victor found out she had it. She wondered what he would say or do when he realized the maid he insulted was the only person who could save him the next morning. Her answer came faster than expected. When Angela arrived for her shift, the front desk clerk whispered, "Guess who's been asking about you?" Angela didn't have to guess. Victor Hale was standing at the far end of the lobby, talking to the hotel manager. His eyes met hers for a moment, and she saw something new in them. Not anger, not arrogance, but curiosity. As if he was seeing her for the first time, Angela gave a polite nod and walked past him. She wasn't going to make this easy. She had no intention of handing over the inheritance until she decided it was time for now. She would let him wander upstairs as she cleaned the empty ballroom. Angela allowed herself a small, private smile. The game had begun, and for once, she was the one holding the winning card. She could feel the weight of the stairs guests. Staff, even children, all watching. The other waiter tried to speak. Up saying, "Sir." It was but Victor raised a hand to silence him. "Don't waste my time," Victor snapped. "She's paid to clean, so clean." Angela's jaw tightened. Every instinct told her to defend herself, to speak up. But years of experience told her something else. In this world, the powerful always won in public fights. So she bent down, quietly blotting the coffee from the floor. Her hands moved steadily, but her heart was beating hard. A few guests pulled out their phones, pretending to check messages, but clearly recording. Some looked uncomfortable, others amused. Angela noticed a kind-faced older woman in the corner shake her head slowly. Whispering to her husband, "Some storms bring their own lightning," she said softly. Her eyes never leaving Victor. Victor, satisfied that his sleeve was being attended to, adjusted his cuff and walked away with his friends, laughing again. As if nothing had happened, the sound of their footsteps faded. But the sting of his words remained. Angela stood up slowly, putting her mop aside, inside. She was not just humiliated, she was angry. Not the loud, shouting kind of anger, but the quiet kind that burns slowly and deeply. She had been treated like she wasn't human before, but there was something about the way he spoke, as if she was not even worth speaking to politely, that stayed with her. She walked to the staff corridor, her head lowered to avoid the pitying glances of coworkers in the small break room. She took off her gloves and sat down, her back against the cold wall. Her hands trembled slightly from her apron pocket. She pulled out a sealed envelope. She had been carrying it all morning, but hadn't opened it yet. The envelope was plain, but the handwriting on it was neat and careful. It had been given to her earlier by a hotel courier who said it came from a lawyer's office. Angela stared at it for a moment. It felt strange. She never received letters, and lawyers had no reason to contact her. For a few seconds, she thought about the man in the lobby, Victor Hale, with his arrogance and his wealth. She wondered if he even remembered her face, too. She was just another uniform, another nameless servant. She slid her finger under the flap and opened the envelope. The paper inside was thick, the kind used for important documents. Her eyes scanned the first few lines and her breath caught. It was a legal notice from the will of a former guest she had once helped. The letter said she had been chosen as the temporary keeper of an estate until the rightful heir could claim it. Then she saw the name, printed clearly, Victor Hale. Angela stared at it for a long time. Her heart beat faster. The same man who had just humiliated her in front of dozens of people would soon need something from her, something that could save him from losing everything. She folded the letter slowly, slipping it back into the envelope. She didn't smile, but her eyes held a new kind of calm. She whispered to herself, "Let's see how the king kneels out in the lobby." Victor Hale laughed with his friends, unaware that the maid he had just insulted was now holding the key to his future. The Grand Royal Hotel glittered under the morning sun, but behind its polished windows, quiet storms were already brewing. Angela entered through the staff entrance, her uniform crisp, her hair tied neatly back, the sealed envelope still resting. Deep in her bag, she had read it so many times now that she could recite every word. And each time, the same thought returned. Victor Hale, the arrogant millionaire who told her to shut up and work, would soon need her help to survive. That knowledge gave her a strange, quiet confidence. It wasn't revenge she wanted. Not yet. It was something else. For once, she wanted him to feel what she and so many others had felt in his presence, powerless. Up in the penthouse floor, Victor was pacing his suite, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, listen to me. I just need another week," he said sharply. He paused, his jaw tightening at the reply. "I don't care about penalties. I'll get the funds. Just don't close the deal yet." He ended the call and threw the phone onto the couch, running a hand through his perfect hair. The truth was eating at him. He was running out of money faster than he had expected. A knock came at his door. When he opened it, a bellboy stood there with a polite bow. "Mr. Hale, the manager says the staff will be cleaning your suite today." Victor frowned. "Fine, send them up." Minutes later, the door opened again. And there she was, Angela. Her eyes were calm, almost unreadable, as she pushed the cleaning cart inside. Victor studied her for a moment, realizing this was the first time he'd really looked at her. She wasn't old, maybe in her late 20s. Her posture straight despite her simple uniform. Her hands moved with quiet skill as she began arranging fresh towels. Victor cleared his throat. "You were in the lobby the other day?" When that coffee spilled, Angela didn't look up. "I remember," she said simply. Victor hesitated. "I didn't mean to." "You know, sound rude." Angela kept dusting the table. "You didn't sound rude, Mr. Hale. You were rude, her." Tone wasn't angry, but it was firm enough to make him shift uncomfortably. He opened his mouth to say something, but stopped for some reason. He felt like he wasn't in control of this conversation, and he didn't like that. Angela moved to the window, wiping the glass in slow, steady strokes. Victor watched her, his mind flickering to the call he had with his lawyer the night before. The lawyer had told him something strange. The key to unlocking his late godfather's inheritance was in the hands of a hotel maid. Victor had laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. But the lawyer's voice had been dead serious. "She's been named the custodian of the estate until you personally claim it from her. Without it, you lose everything. Now?" Standing in the same room with her, Victor's pride twisted in his chest. He didn't want to ask, didn't want to admit he needed her, but desperation was creeping in. "Angela, is it? Do we know each other outside of work?" he asked casually, trying to open the door to the topic. Angela finally turned, her eyes meeting his. "No, Mr. Hale. We only met when you told me to shut up and work," she replied. Her words were like a mirror. Forcing him to hear himself again, he tried to smile, but it came out awkward. "Well, People say things they don't mean sometimes. Angela didn't answer. She just packed her cleaning supplies, ready to leave. Victor stepped forward. Wait, before you go. Did my lawyer happen to contact you? Angela paused, her hand on the cart handle. She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to answer. Yes, she said finally. He did. Victor's shoulders eased. Relief flickering across his face. Good. Then you know how important, Angela interrupted softly. I know exactly how important it is. Her voice carried no anger, just quiet control. She wheeled the cart toward the door, stopping only to say, But Mr. Hale, important things should go to people who know their worth. Then she walked out, leaving him standing in the silence of his luxury suite. Victor's stomach tightened. For years, he had been the one holding power in every interaction. But now, somehow, the maid had the upper hand, and worse, she knew it, that night. Angela sat by her small kitchen table at home, sipping tea. The envelope lay in front of her, unopened again. She didn't need to open it. She already knew what was inside. The question was no longer what she would do with it. It was when, outside, the city buzzed with life. But inside her apartment, the balance of power between a billionaire and a maid had shifted quietly. And though neither of them knew how far this game would go, one thing was certain: the next move belonged to Angela. 2 days had passed since Victor Hale spoke to Angela in his suite. In those 2 days, the world that once obeyed his every command had begun to shift. Calls from investors grew colder. Meetings were postponed, and his assistant had resigned without notice. The air around him felt heavier, the kind of heaviness that comes before a storm. Victor had been in trouble before, but never like this in the past. He could charm his way out, write a check, or make a few calls to friends in high places. But now, money was draining faster than it was coming in, and friends in high places were suddenly too busy to help. One afternoon, Victor walked into the hotel lobby wearing his usual tailored suit from the outside. He still looked untouchable: polished shoes, gold watch, confident walk, but his eyes told a different story. He had not slept well. The weight of sleepless nights showed in the dark circles beneath them. Angela was working quietly in the corner, polishing the brass handles of the main entrance. She didn't look at him when he passed, but she noticed the stiffness in his movements. She noticed how he avoided eye contact with the wealthy guests who used to greet him. And she noticed the faint tremble in his hand when he reached for his phone. Victor sat at the bar, ordering a drink he barely touched. 2 men in suits walked past, speaking just loud enough for others to hear. Did you hear? Hale's empire is crumbling. One whispered, surprised it lasted this long. The other replied. Victor's jaw tightened, but he didn't turn around. The words were true, and he knew it. From her spot across the lobby, Angela saw the way his shoulders slumped slightly. For a man like Victor, slumping was the same as screaming. She remembered the letter in her bag at home, the one that could save him. And for a moment, she wondered if she should give it to him now. But the memory of his voice, shut up, and work reminded her she wasn't ready. Later that day, in the staff break room, Rosa approached her. Your friend is falling apart out there, she said with a half smile. Angela raised an eyebrow. He's not my friend. Rosa shrugged. Still, you've seen how the mighty are starting to trip. Maybe you'll see him fall completely that evening. Victor stood outside the hotel, staring at the city skyline. The streets were alive with honking cars and glowing signs, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was the inheritance, the lifeline that could keep him from losing everything. And the fact that it was in the hands of the very woman he had disrespected in front of dozens of people the next morning. As Angela was dusting a large mirror in the lobby, Victor approached her. Angela, he said quietly. She kept working. Pretending not to hear Angela, he repeated, this time softer. She turned, her expression calm. Yes, Mr. Hale. I wanted to talk to you. Privately, he said. Angela straightened. I'm working. She replied simply. Victor hesitated, then glanced around at the guests nearby. This is important, he insisted. Angela's eyes flickered with something unreadable. Important things usually are, she said, before walking away. Victor felt heat rise in his chest, not anger, but something worse, helplessness. He was a man who had always been in control, and now he was chasing after a maid for a conversation. By midday, his patience cracked. He went to the hotel manager's office, asking to see Angela's work schedule. The manager looked at him in surprise. Why do you need that? Victor forced a smile. I just want to apologize to her. But even as he said it, the words tasted strange on his tongue. That night, alone in his penthouse, Victor stared at the ceiling. Every tick of the clock sounded louder, he thought. Of the letter, of the lawyer's words, and of Angela's calm, unshaken face. He realized she was not intimidated by him, and maybe never had been. That thought unsettled him more than the debt notices piling on his desk. Somewhere across the city, Angela was sitting at her kitchen table. Sipping tea, she unfolded the letter once more, reading the name, Victor Hale. Her fingers lingered on the paper. She wasn't sure when she would hand it over. But she knew one thing. She wanted him to understand the value of respect before he touched a single coin of that inheritance. And so, she decided to wait, because sometimes the slowest lessons are the ones that stay forever. By the third day, Victor Hale's carefully built walls had begun to crack. He was still wearing his expensive suits, but his tie hung looser. His shoes had lost their shine, and the spark in his confident smile was gone. Even the staff, who used to step aside when he walked past, noticed the change. It wasn't just the debts closing in, it was the slow, humiliating truth that his future now depended on the maid he had once insulted in front of everyone. Angela knew it too. She saw it in the way he glanced at her whenever she entered the lobby. She felt it in the air when he lingered nearby, trying to find the right moment to speak, but she never made it easy. She simply went on with her work, polishing, cleaning, arranging, like he wasn't even there that afternoon. Victor finally gathered enough courage to follow her into the staff hallway. She was stacking fresh towels onto a cart when she heard his voice. Angela. Please, just give me 5 minutes. She turned, calm as ever. 5 minutes for what, Mr. Hale? His jaw tightened. To explain, Angela crossed her arms, leaning slightly against the cart. You already explained in the lobby 3 days ago. I remember it clearly. Shut up and work. Her words hit harder than he expected. He let out a slow breath. I was wrong. I need your help. Angela's expression didn't change. What kind of help could a maid give? A millionaire. Victor swallowed his pride. It's about the inheritance. My lawyer told me. You have the documents. Angela didn't answer right away. She simply adjusted the stack of towels, as if his words were no more urgent than a misplaced pillow. Yes. She said finally, I have them. His shoulders eased slightly, but her next words froze him. But things of value should only be given to people who understand their worth. Victor's pride flared, but desperation crushed it just as quickly. Angela, please. I don't get that estate. I lose everything. My business, my home. Everything I've built. Angela tilted her head. And what have you built, Mr. Hale? Money without kindness. Power without respect. Her questions were like quiet daggers. Victor looked away, unable to meet her eyes. I know I haven't treated people right, he admitted softly, but I can change. Angela gave a faint smile. Everyone says they can change when they're desperate. She pushed the cart past him, heading back to the lobby. Victor stood there for a moment, his fists clenching and unclenching. He wasn't used to being dismissed. But now it was happening every time he spoke to her. And it burned. Later that evening, Victor tried again. He waited until Angela was in the staff kitchen, making tea during her short break. When she turned, she found him standing in the doorway, his hands resting on the frame. This time, his voice was quieter, almost hesitant. "Angela, I'm sorry. I was arrogant, and I hurt you." "You didn't deserve that." Angela set her cup down, looking at him steadily. "An apology is a good start," she said, "but apologies without change are just words." He stepped inside, his voice dropping lower. "I'll prove it. If you give me this chance, I'll prove I can be better." Angela studied him for a long moment. "Mr. Hale, respect isn't something you earn in a day," she said. "It's something you build over years. And right now, you don't have the foundation." Her words were not cruel, but they were firm. Victor nodded slowly, a sign that the fight in him was being replaced by something else: humility. As she picked up her tea again, she added, "Think about what you want to be remembered for. Money fades, names fade. But how you treat people, that stays." Victor's throat tightened at her words. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly small. That night, Victor didn't sleep. He kept replaying the conversation in his mind. It wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about something deeper. He realized Angela wasn't just holding documents. She was holding the mirror he had avoided looking into for years. The next morning, he did something no one had ever seen him do. He walked into the lobby and dead-eyed on. Greeted every staff member by name. The bellboy almost dropped a suitcase in shock. The receptionist smiled nervously, unsure if he was joking. But when Angela passed through carrying a fresh vase of flowers, he stepped forward. "Good morning, Angela," he said sincerely. She paused, nodded politely, and kept walking. For now, that was enough. Victor knew the road to her trust would be long, but he had taken the first step, and for the first time, he wanted to take that road not just to save his fortune, but to save himself. The Grand Royal Hotel was busier than usual that morning, a conference for high-profile business. Leaders had filled the lobby with suits, glittering jewelry, and the low hum of important conversations. Staff moved quickly but carefully, making sure everything was perfect. In the middle of all this, Angela moved silently with a fresh cart of cleaning supplies, her presence almost blending into the background, almost because someone's eyes kept following her. Victor Hale stood near the tall glass entrance, talking half-heartedly with two investors. He smiled politely when needed, but his mind wasn't on the conversation. It was on Angela. 3 days ago, she had refused to give him the inheritance papers. 2 days ago, she had rejected his apology. Yesterday, she had simply walked past him without a word. Today, he had decided it was time to let go of his pride completely. The investors excused themselves, leaving Victor standing alone. He took a deep breath and walked toward Angela. The sound of his footsteps caught her attention. She glanced at him once, then returned to arranging flowers in a vase at the reception desk. "Angela," he said, his voice steady but low. She didn't look up. "Mr. Hale," she replied, her tone polite but distant. "I need to speak to you." "Please." Her hands kept working. "If it's about the documents." "I've already told you, it's not just about the documents," he interrupted. This made her pause. When she finally turned to look at him, he felt the weight of her calm gaze. "I'm sorry," he said again, louder this time. "Not just for that day, but for every time I've treated someone like they were less than me." The lobby grew quieter. Nearby guests and staff turned subtly to watch a millionaire apologizing to a maid was not something they saw every day. Angela held his gaze. Saying nothing, Victor swallowed hard. "I was raised to think money made me better. I thought success meant power, and power meant control." His voice wavered, but I was wrong. Completely wrong. He took a step closer, his tone breaking. "I've lost deals. I've lost friends. I might lose everything. But what I can't lose is this chance to be a better man." Angela's eyes softened slightly, but she stayed silent. Victor realized she wasn't going to make this easy, and maybe that was the point. Something inside him shifted without thinking. He lowered himself to his knees right there in the lobby. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones came out. Snapping photos and recording videos, the once untouchable Victor Hale was kneeling in front of the maid he had humiliated. "Please, Angela," he said, his voice trembling now. "I am begging you. Forgive me. Not for the money, not for the documents, but for the man I've been." He looked up at her with unguarded eyes. "I need to change. And I want to start by making things right with you." For a long moment, Angela didn't move. The sight of him on his knees, head slightly bowed, was something she never imagined. It wasn't just the position. It was the way his voice carried real pain. This wasn't a performance for the crowd. This was a man finally breaking. She set the vase down carefully. Then she reached into the deep pocket of her apron. Her fingers touched the sealed envelope. The same envelope she had guarded for days. "You want these?" she asked softly, holding the envelope just enough for him to see it. Victor's eyes flickered to it, then back to her face. "I want your forgiveness more," he said. Angela's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Inheritance or not, Mr. Hale, the real wealth you need is here." She tapped her chest lightly. "Not in a bank account." She held the envelope out to him. "Take it. But remember, if you go back to the man you were, you'll lose more than money." Victor's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the envelope. He didn't open it. Instead, he placed his free hand over his heart and bowed his head again. "Thank you," he said simply. The moment lingered, the crowd watching, the hum of whispers filling the air. Victor stood slowly, his knees stiff from the marble floor, but his pride lighter than it had been in years as Angela walked away. To continue her duties, Victor didn't stop her. He just watched her go. Realizing the truth, the woman he told to shut up and work had taught him more about dignity in a week than all his years in business had taught him about life. The video of Victor Hale kneeling in front of Angela had spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, it was on social media, news, blogs, and even the television in the hotel lobby. Guests whispered about it. Staff replayed it on their phones. And strangers from across the city were calling it the Grand Royal Apology. Victor could have been embarrassed, but surprisingly, he wasn't. The man who once valued image above everything now saw it differently. The kneeling wasn't weakness. It was the first honest thing he had done in years. Angela, however, was unchanged. She continued her work as before, polishing, cleaning, arranging as if the scene in the lobby had never happened. She didn't treat Victor like a hero for apologizing, and she didn't give him extra attention either. In her eyes, respect wasn't earned with one public act. It was proven quietly. Every day, Victor understood that now, and he began to act accordingly. On the first morning after receiving the envelope, he made a decision. Instead of rushing to the bank to secure the inheritance, he went to the manager's office. "I'd like to make a change," he said firmly. "Angela should be promoted to head of staff." And her salary doubled. The manager's eyebrows shot up. "That's generous, Mr. Hale. May I ask why?" Victor smiled faintly. "Because she's worth it." Later that week, Angela was called into the office and informed of her promotion. She accepted it calmly, but when she stepped outside, she caught sight of Victor waiting near the elevators. He didn't approach her. He simply nodded once, as if to say, "This is yours." Angela gave a small nod back and walked away. For the first time in his life, Victor found himself wanting to listen more than talk. He greeted the doorman by name, thanked the cleaning crew each night, and even helped a bellboy carry a heavy trunk when the elevator broke. Small acts, unnoticed by most, but felt deeply by those who had only ever seen him as a distant figure. Weeks passed, and the inheritance papers were processed. Victor could have used the money to rebuild his old empire. Instead, he surprised everyone. He sold a large portion of his luxury holdings and invested in small local businesses. When reporters asked why, Kay simply said, "It's time to give back." One late afternoon, Angela was leaving the hotel after her shift when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Victor, dressed in a simple shirt and jacket instead of his usual designer suit. "Angela," he said, catching up to her, "I wanted to thank you." "Again, you already did," she replied with a small smile. "Yes, but this is different," he said, his tone softer now. "You didn't just give me documents, Angela. You gave me a chance to be better." "I don't want to waste it," Angela studied his face for a moment. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no trace of the man who had once barked at her in the lobby. Only sincerity. "I hope you don't waste it either," she said, turning to continue her walk. But before she left, she added, "And Victor, you don't have to kneel to prove you've changed. Just keep standing for the right things." Victor watched her go, her figure disappearing into the glow of the setting sun. He realized something in that moment. The inheritance had saved his finances, but Angela's dignity had saved his soul. From then on, whenever Victor visited the hotel, guests noticed something unusual. He would stop by the reception desk, greet the staff warmly, and sometimes even carry a vase of flowers into the lobby. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Angela never boasted about what happened, never told her side of the story to the press, but the staff knew, and they whispered it like a quiet legend. That man told her to shut up, and now he listens when she speaks. And perhaps that was the truest measure of change, not the money in the bank, not the headlines in the news, but the silent respect between a once proud millionaire and the maid who had taught him the value of humility.